Hello, friends. I'm Dr. Abhishek Naduri, and here I am before you to discuss a very, very important topic, both clinically and in MCQ point of view, in the subject of medicine, that is cardiomyopathies. So, let's get started. Friends, there are basically four types of cardiomyopathies: hypertrophied cardiomyopathy, restrictive cardiomyopathy, and dilated cardiomyopathy. We'll see about each one of them in a clinical approach. First, we'll see the case scenario, then, we'll come to the diagnosis, then, we'll see what is the pathophysiology. In this way, you can be able to revise the topic twice and you'll also get the key hold of the key points or the key things you need to look in the question to get your diagnosis right. So, what is cardiomyopathy? It is basically a disease of the myocardium in which the heart is structurally and functionally normal. So, in the absence of pre-existing disease of the heart, it is a disease of the myocardium. My dear friends, you must rule out coronary artery disease, valvular heart disease, hypertension, and congenital heart disease before keeping a diagnosis of cardiomyopathy. So, in the presence of any one of them, in the presence of coronary artery disease, if you keep a diagnosis of dilated cardiomyopathy, your diagnosis is wrong. It is rather called ischemic cardiomyopathy. So, in the absence of coronary artery disease, in the absence of hypertension, in the absence of congenital heart disease, it is a disease of the myocardium. Let's see our first case scenario or clinical scenario. My dear friends, I already emphasized this point. Whenever you come across a long question or a long case scenario, firstly, you must identify the key points. You must identify the key clinical findings so that you can reach the diagnosis as early as possible. So, let's get started. A 40-year-old female who has been known to be suffering from several polyneuropathies since childhood now comes with the chief complaint of easy fatigability and leg swellings since the last 6 months. She gives a history of subtle exercise intolerance since the last 2 years. On examination, there is raised JVP and grade 2 pedal edema. Apex beat was in normal position. On performing ECG, low voltage complexes are seen on ECG. What is the likely diagnosis and what is the gene likely mutated? So, my dear friends, you need to get the diagnosis right. That alone is not sufficient. You need to get the gene also right. So, let's see. You need to identify the keywords in the question. 40-year-old female who has been known to be suffering from several polyneuropathies since childhood. So, you must think of a familial or a congenital disease now. Now comes with the chief complaint of easy fatigability, abdominal discomfort, leg swellings since the last 6 months. On examination, there is raised JVP and grade 2 pedal edema. My dear friends, raised JVP, grade 2 pedal edema, and hepatic congestion, all these three are features of right heart failure. So, you must be aware of the features of right heart failure and the features of left heart failure before diagnosing a cardiomyopathy. So, raised JVP, hepatomegaly, congestive hepatomegaly, and grade 2 pedal edema, all these suggest towards the finding of right heart failure. On performing ECG, low voltage complexes are seen on ECG. Friends, in the entire cardiology, there are only four conditions where there are low voltage complexes on ECG. First, it is constrictive pericarditis, or it is myxedema or hypothyroidism, and the third thing is amyloidosis due to restrictive cardiomyopathy. And the fourth and the important one is cardiac tamponade. So I'll discuss them about them in the next slides, but you must be thorough. Four conditions producing low voltage complexes on the ECG. What is the likely diagnosis and what is the gene implicated? So he already gave the clue in the question that it is a congenital disease. It is a congenital disease, so he's asking for the gene. So polyneuropathy, congenital disease. I'll think of familial amyloid polyneuropathy and it producing restrictive cardiomyopathy, thereby producing low voltage complexes on ECG. So our diagnosis is restrictive cardiomyopathy due to amyloidosis. So let us see what is a restrictive cardiomyopathy. Severe diastolic dysfunction of the heart with the systolic function to be normal. My dear friends, the heart should be able to pump blood as well as it has to be able to receive blood. Whenever it won't receive blood, it is known as diastolic dysfunction of the heart. We tend to think that the systolic dysfunction of the heart is more dangerous. But believe me, my dear friends, it is the diastolic dysfunction and the systolic dysfunction. Both are equally dangerous. Both the AT are enlarged with normal ventricles. Again, I'll stress on this point because in dilated cardiomyopathy, the ventricles are enlarged. But we saw in the question that apex beat was normal, so the ventricles are normal in shape and size. Diastolic dysfunction of the heart itself indicates that the heart is not able to receive enough blood. There are three causes which can lead to restrictive cardiomyopathy. The first one, infiltration between the myocytes, or storage of substance within the myocytes, or fibrosis of the myocardium. So, let's see about each one of them in detail. Infiltration between the myocytes. My dear friends, the most common cause of restrictive cardiomyopathy overall in the world and in India is amyloidosis. And believe me, friends, it is the primary amyloidosis which causes restrictive cardiomyopathy. While in secondary amyloidosis, the heart is usually spared and the kidneys are more commonly affected. So, if you think that the amyloidosis affects the heart, you should think of primary amyloidosis first. So, in our disease, it was familial amyloid polyneuropathy. It is the mutant transthyretin which is accumulating in the heart. Whereas in senile systemic amyloidosis, it is the normal transthyretin which accumulates within the heart. So, my dear friends, you should be able to differentiate between familial amyloid polyneuropathy and senile systemic amyloidosis. In both the conditions, it is the transthyretin which accumulates. But in familial amyloid polyneuropathy, it is the mutant transthyretin which accumulates. And in senile systemic amyloidosis, it is the normal transthyretin which accumulates. This is an important finding, my dear friends. Again, we should integrate our knowledge of medicine, pathology, and pharmacology together. If we see what is amyloidosis in pathology, we find that amyloid is extracellular eosinophilic fibrillary protein that accumulates in various organs of the body, and it is Congo red stain positive and shows apple green birefringence on polarizing microscopy. So this is a very, very important finding, my dear friend, and you must be able to identify this image in the patho slide. So what is amyloidosis? It is a pathological, proteinaceous, amorphous, extracellular eosinophilic substance deposited in various tissues and organs due to misfolded protein. Again, amyloid is nothing but a protein, but it is that protein which cannot be digested by the human enzymes. So, amyloidosis is a pathological misfolded protein accumulating in various organs of the body and thus producing the symptoms. And again, it shows non-branching fibrils on electron microscopy. All these are potential questions in pathology, my dear friends. So, in this way, you should be able to integrate between medicine, pathology, and pharmacology. And then reading these subjects and revising these subjects becomes easy for you. The second category of the restrictive cardiomyopathy, that is, storage within the myocytes. That there are only three diseases that are to be stressed upon. The first one is Fabry's disease. The second one is glycogen storage disorder type 3. The third one is hemochromatosis. Again, my dear friends, this is a very, very important question. In hemochromatosis, it is the dilated cardiomyopathy which is more common than the restrictive cardiomyopathy. Generally, our brain tends to think that the iron is accumulating in various organs of the body in hemochromatosis. So, the iron accumulates within the heart and it produces restrictive cardiomyopathy. But it is no. It is dilated cardiomyopathy which is more common in hemochromatosis than the restrictive cardiomyopathy. Again, my dear friends, these are the important diseases in biochem. You must refer to your biochem notes to get the enzymes involved in Fabry disease and glycogen storage disorder type 3. Fabry disease is due to alpha galactosidase deficiency, and glycogen storage disorder type 3 is due to debranching enzyme deficiency. Let us see another case scenario. A 20-year-old male comes with the skin finding as shown. By looking at the skin finding, you must be able to know that these are angiokeratomas of the skin. And he gives a history of transient ischemic attacks, recurrent transient ischemic attacks, and syncope, suggesting there is something depositing in his blood vessels. And again, looking at these friends, what can you see? These are concentric spirals accumulating in various tissues of the body. So, the diagnosis has to be Fabry's disease. So again, a young male coming with a history of recurrent attacks of syncope and angiokeratomas of the skin, and on biopsy you find concentric whorls. The diagnosis has to be Fabry disease. And what do you expect? What is the type of cardiomyopathy you expect in Fabry disease? It is nothing but restrictive cardiomyopathy. So Fabry disease, you must be able to integrate medicine with biochem in this way. You heard of Fabry disease? Take your biochem notes and read about Fabry disease and other types of lysosomal storage disorders. It is due to alpha galactosidase deficiency. Multisystem involvement is seen. So brain involves recurrent transient ischemic attacks and strokes, and heart it is restrictive cardiomyopathy. Concentric inclusions that we saw in the picture below are concentric lamellar inclusions and foamy macrophages on biopsy. So we revised biochem, pharmacology, pathology along with medicine. Again, this is an ophthalmology question. Cherry red spot is not seen in Fabry disease. Cherry red spot is not seen in Fabry disease. So you go out and read about cherry red spot in ophthalmology. In this way, integrating the subjects, you tend to mug the things less and you tend to remember them better. You need to understand medicine in an integrated way. So let's see what is cherry red spot. It is not seen in Fabry disease and Gaucher disease. This is a very, very important finding, my dear friends, and it is seen in Tay-Sachs disease and Niemann-Pick's disease. Again, if we see that in Tay-Sachs disease there is no hepatosplenomegaly and Niemann-Pick's disease there is hepatosplenomegaly. So in this way you can be able to differentiate between the two. Classically, central retinal artery occlusion and Berlin's edema or commotion retina, that is, blunt trauma to the eyelid, produces cherry red spot. It is due to the sparing of the blood supply of the fovea, which shines with the entire retina appearing dull. So, whenever you see cherry red spot in medicine, you should take out your ophthalmology book and see the causes of cherry red spot. Again, the important causes where it is not seen. It is not seen in Gaucher disease and Fabry disease. Fabry disease is due to alpha galactosidase deficiency. On biopsy, what do you see? Concentric lamellar inclusions and foamy macrophages. In this way, you tend to integrate ophthalmology, pathology, biochemistry with medicine. This is the image of cherry red spot, my dear friends, due to the sparing of the blood supply to the foveolar vessels. Do not confuse it with macular hole, my dear friends, because cherry red spot and macular hole, I used to see and feel that both are same. But macular hole is a different pathology entirely, and you will be given the OCT image where you can clearly identify the macular hole, which is seen here. So cherry red spot is not seen in Fabry disease. Third and the most important cause of restrictive cardiomyopathy is fibrosis of the myocardium. The first and the most important disease is scleroderma, producing fibrosis of the myocardium. Endomyocardial fibrosis. Classically, endomyocardial fibrosis is seen with tropical endomyocardial fibrosis associated with hypereosinophilia syndrome and Loftus syndrome. These are very, very important questions, my dear friends. Again, it's also associated with carcinoid syndrome, also associated with radiation, also associated with drugs causing restrictive cardiomyopathy. You should think of ergotamine and serotonin. Ergotamine is the drug which can be used for migraine, but because of severe side effects, it is never used. So, in this way, you should be able to integrate between different subjects. So, let's see what is Loftus syndrome. Again, it's a very, very important question in your microbiology. You must be able to differentiate between hypereosinophilia and Loftus syndrome. Again, fibrosis leading to the thrombus formation. So, anticoagulant must be included in the therapy to restrictive cardiomyopathy. Otherwise, the patient will land up in stroke or atrial fibrillation. Again, fibrosis is more common in right ventricle than left ventricle, as common sense, because the right ventricle has thin wall than left ventricle. So fibrosis can easily affect the right ventricle, but it requires a greater effort to include the thick wall of the left ventricle. As we already saw in the case, the symptoms of right-sided heart failure, rise JVP, congestive hepatomegaly, and pedal edema are more common with the right side of the heart than the left side of the heart. So, let's see, my dear friends, what is the difference between tropical pulmonary eosinophilia and Loftus syndrome? Tropical pulmonary eosinophilia, or TPA, is characterized by coughing, recurrent asthmatic attacks, and when you palpate the abdomen, you'll find an enlarged spleen. and it is classically caused by Wuchereria bancrofti, a filarial infection, most common infection in India and Southeast Asia. Whereas tropical eosinophilia is considered as a manifestation of species of microfilaria. The closest differential diagnoses are TB and asthma in India. And again, you can find the microfilaria migrating to the lungs and then it is causing tropical pulmonary eosinophilia. Whereas in Loeffler syndrome, it is not the case. The worm itself is not found in the lungs. Let's see about Loeffler syndrome. Loeffler syndrome is a disease in which the eosinophils accumulate in the lungs in response to a parasitic infection. The parasite can be Strongyloides stercoralis. This is a very, very important question on Strongyloides stercoralis. You must open your microbiology book and read the life cycle and the pathology, symptoms, and the history of Strongyloides stercoralis or Ascaris or Dirophilaria immitis. Ascaris and Strongyloides are the two parasites which are more commonly involved with Loeffler syndrome, which can enter the body on contact with the soil. So, penetration of the skin by the filariform larva. This is also an important previous exam question. Remember, my dear friends, in tropical pulmonary eosinophilia, it was the organism, that is, microfilaria larva, which was causing the disease, whereas the organism itself is not found in the lungs in Loeffler syndrome. So, all these two are causing restrictive cardiomyopathy due to fibrosis. This is an important thing. So, in this way, we are integrating medicine with microbiology. So, let us see the features of restrictive cardiomyopathy. Subtle exercise intolerance is the first symptom and it is usually neglected by the patients. Again, my dear friends, the right side of the heart is involved more common than the left, as the wall of the right ventricle is thinner and the wall of the left ventricle is thicker. Features of right-sided heart failures can be seen. Those are raised JVP, hepatic congestion, and pedal edema. The atria ulna are enlarged, but the ventricles are normal in size, so the apex beat is usually normal. This is a very, very important point to differentiate between restrictive cardiomyopathy and dilated cardiomyopathy. In restrictive cardiomyopathy, the apex beat is normal, whereas in dilated cardiomyopathy, the apex beat is shifted down and out due to left ventricular hypertrophy. So I will discuss about it in the next slide. But you must be able to differentiate between the two, the restrictive cardiomyopathy and the dilated cardiomyopathy. On auscultation, the heart sounds of muffled and S4 is heard. S4, again my dear friends, going back to physiology, S4 is due to atria contracting against a stiffened ventricle, where the ventricles are stiffened and are not able to receive any blood, thereby causing diastolic failure. So the atria are contracting vigorously to fill these ventricles which are not filling with blood. So S4 is pathognomic of restrictive cardiomyopathy, whereas we see that S3 was pathognomic of dilated cardiomyopathy. ECG is usually normal. My dear friends, not in all the cases of in restrictive cardiomyopathy, low voltage ECGs are seen. It is only and only in amyloidosis you can see low voltage ECG complexes. Restrictive cardiomyopathy due to amyloidosis. There is thickened left ventricle. My dear friends, I already said that the walls of the ventricles are in normal size and there is only diastolic failure. But if the restrictive cardiomyopathy is due to amyloidosis, there is thickened left ventricle and low voltage ECG complexes are to be seen. This is an example of low voltage ECG complexes, my dear friends. You can see the QRS being low voltage in all the leads, in both the limb leads and the chest leads. So what is the definition of low voltage ECG complexes? Less than 5 mm in the limb leads and less than 10 mm in the chest leads. So that is an important thing. Less than 5 mm in the limb lead and less than 10 mm in the chest leads. Again, my dear friends, I would like to stress this point. There are only three causes of restrictive cardio. There are only three causes of low voltage ECG complexes. The first one and the very important one is constrictive pericarditis. You must rule out constrictive pericarditis if you feel or if you see low voltage complexes in the ECG. And the second one, mixed edema or hypothyroidism. And the third one is cardiac tamponade. Cardiac tamponade is a very, very important cause, and pericardial effusion and constrictive pericarditis, cardiac tamponade, all three come under the same category of low voltage ECG complexes. Then at the end, you must think of amyloidosis causing restrictive cardiomyopathy and low voltage ECG complexes. Again, what is the definition of low voltage ECG complexes? Less than 5 mm in the chest, in the limb leads, and less than 10 mm in the chest leads. These are the V1 to V6 are chest leads, and 1, 2, 3 AVL, AVR, AVF are limb leads. So, this is an ECG of cardiac tamponade, my dear friends. You can see alternating high and low voltage ECG complexes. So, it is a case of cardiac tamponade or electrical alternance. So, the features of cardiac tamponade are sinus tachycardia, electrical alternance, and low voltage ECG complexes. And my dear friends, you must be thorough of the Beck's triad, that is rise JVP, hypotension, and muffled heart sounds. These are the features of cardiac tamponade. And my dear friends, please remember that cardiac tamponade is a clinical diagnosis. You must have a high clinical suspicion of cardiac tamponade, and you must right away go for pericardiocentesis, that is life saving for the patient. You cannot you cannot send the patient for an ECG or chest X-ray and waste your precious time. You must be engaged in preserving the health of the patient, and you must protect his life. So we say that this ECG was not to be taken. Electrical alternance is a finding in cardiac tamponade, but my dear friends, cardiac tamponade is an emergency and it is a clinical diagnosis. Rise JPP, muffled heart sounds, hypotension, patient is tachypneic and is gasping for breath. You cannot order an ECG. You cannot go for a chest X-ray. Chest X-ray is contraindicated in cardiac tamponade. So right away you must do pericardiocentesis as early as possible. So that was all about restrictive cardiomyopathy, my dear friends. So it was already due to three causes. If it is due to amyloidosis, it produces low voltage ECG complexes and there's thickened left ventricle. And restrictive cardiomyopathy involves right side more common than the left side, and their features of diastolic heart failure. And again, restrictive cardiomyopathy, the apex is normal as the ventricles are normal in size, and S4 is the pathognomic size of restrictive cardiomyopathy, heart sound, because atria contracting against a stiffened ventricle producing S4. Let us see the next clinical scenario, my dear friends. That is, a 30-year-old lactating female with, with obstetric formula gravida 2, para 1, live 1 came with the chief complaints of progressive dyspnea and fatigue since 6 months of her delivery. She was known to be hypertensive during pregnancy and was also given tocolytics in her pregnancy in view of premature labor. On examination, her pulse was feeble and amplitude of the pulse was varying between low and high in consecutive beats, and BP recording was 100 by 70 mm of mercury. Her apex beat was shifted down and out, JVP was elevated, and mild pedal edema is seen. She also gave a similar history of dyspnea and fatigue following her first pregnancy. What is the likely diagnosis and the most appropriate treatment? Again, my dear friends, it is a long clinical scenario, so you must be able to identify the keywords and the key points in the question. So, a 30-year-old lactating female with progressive dyspnea and fatigue. Features suggestive of left heart failure. She was known to be hypertension during pregnancy. From our OBS knowledge, we know that it is preeclampsia. And my dear friends, you must be aware that preterm labor is a complication of preeclampsia. So tocolytics were given. Amplitude of pulse was varying between high and low amplitude in consecutive beats. My dear friends, what is it called? It is called pulsus alternans. Pulsus alternans is known as amplitude of pulse varying between high and low beats. Apex beat shifted down and out. It is suggestive of left ventricular hypertrophy. My dear friends, down and out apex suggestive of left ventricular hypertrophy. Apex going only out but not down is right ventricular hypertrophy. You must be aware of all these topics by your clinics. You cannot just say which is left-sided heart failure or right-sided heart failure. It will not be given in a straightaway manner in the question. Only clinical signs will be given, and you must be able to identify the type of heart failure with the clinical findings. Similar history, similar complaint in the past. So, my dear friends, this is suggestive of dilated cardiomyopathy with the apex twisted down and out, and pulses alternance is also seen. And the cause of dilated cardiomyopathy is pregnancy, with the risk factors being preeclampsia and tocolytics in pregnancy. So it is not none other than peripartum cardiomyopathy with a high rate of recurrence. So she also gave a similar history of dyspnea and fatigue following first pregnancy. Let us see another question, my dear friends. A 55-year-old male patient who is known to be a case of coronary artery disease developed dyspnea and fatigue over the last 2 years. The patient is obese and is a known smoker. He also gave a history of heart attack last year. He is on angina medication presently. He is a known diabetic and is on hypoglycemic drugs. On examination, His pulse was feeble, amplitude was varying between high and low in consecutive beats, and BP was 100 by 70 mm of mercury. His apex beat was shifted down and out. What is the likely diagnosis? Again, my dear friends, male patient coming with the features of dilated cardiomyopathy, that is, pulses alternance, dyspnea and fatigue over the last 2 years. Again, it is a progressive course. He has a history of MI last year and is on angina medication. He is also having a history of diabetes. Pulsus alternans, down and out apex, dilated cardiomyopathy. But again, my dear friends, I already said cardiomyopathy is a disease of myocardium in the absence of pre existing coronary artery disease, valvular heart disease, or any other congenital heart disease. But he has a history of MI, so your diagnosis of dilated cardiomyopathy is wrong. It is a case of ischemic cardiomyopathy. So, you cannot put a diagnosis of cardiomyopathy if there is pre-existing coronary artery disease, valvular heart disease, pre-existing hypertension, or pre-existing congenital heart disease. You must rule all these four out before keeping a diagnosis of cardiomyopathy. So, let us see what is dilated cardiomyopathy. In this, there is systolic dysfunction of the heart. The heart is not able to pump enough blood to the peripheral tissues or to meet the oxygen requirements of the peripheral tissues. Again, we saw that restrictive cardiomyopathy was a diastolic dysfunction of the heart. Left side of the heart is more commonly involved than the right side. Again, restrictive cardiomyopathy, right side was more involved than the right. Not to be confused with ischemic cardiomyopathy of the heart, where there is pre-existing coronary artery disease, previous history of MI, or recent history of stroke. So, it is not to be confused with ischemic cardiomyopathy. A dilated cardiomyopathy and ischemic cardiomyopathy have same clinical features and same clinical signs, but the history will lead to the diagnosis of ischemic cardiomyopathy. Symptoms include features of left heart failure, that is, decreased perfusion to the vital organs, fatigue and dyspnea, and signs of both right and left heart failure are seen here. So, restrictive cardiomyopathy more commonly seen, we see the signs of right heart failure, whereas in dilated cardiomyopathy, signs of right and left heart failure or only left heart failure may be seen. Causes. Titin gene mutation is the most common gene mutation in- implicated in dilated cardiomyopathy. And again, my dear friends, from your pathology knowledge, you must be known that titin is the largest known protein in the human body. Desmosomal protein is involved in arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia, deafening gene mutation, and left ventricular non-compaction syndrome. So, we read about three genes in dilated cardiomyopathy. Titin gene mutation, most common, largest known protein. Desmosomal mutation in ARVD, arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia. Deafening gene mutation and left ventricular non-compaction. And again, the fourth and the most important gene that you must know is beta-myosin gene mutation implicated in hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. So, when you read the topic of cardiomyopathy, you must be aware of all these four genes. These are memory points, my dear friends, so you must be thorough with them. Titin, dilated cardiomyopathy, most common genetic or inherited cause of dilated cardiomyopathy. Desmosomal gene mutation in arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia. Deafening gene mutation in left ventricular non-compaction. Again, there are other causes of dilated cardiomyopathy like drug-induced cardiomyopathy, peripartum cardiomyopathy, and alcoholic cardiomyopathy. So, genetic causes include titin gene mutation, desmosomal gene mutation, and arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia, deafening gene mutation, and left ventricular non-compaction. Drug-induced cardiomyopathy, pericardium cardiomyopathy, and alcoholic cardiomyopathy. Again, not to forget, the important and the most important, most clinically important question is myocarditis, which leads to dilated cardiomyopathy. There may be infective or non-infective causes of dilated cardiomyopathy leading from myocarditis. So, all these are important. Genetic, myocarditis leading to dilated cardiomyopathy, drug-induced, peripartum cardiomyopathy with high chances of recurrence, and alcoholic cardiomyopathy, which is the most common type of cardiomyopathy. This was a previous NEET question. Most common cause of dilated cardiomyopathy is alcoholic cardiomyopathy. So, let us see what are the drugs which are implicated in dilated cardiomyopathy. The first group of drugs are anthracycline group of drugs. Again, by your pharmacology knowledge, you must integrate what are anthracyclines. These are doxorubicin, daunorubicin, methoxantrines. What is the mechanism of action? What are the side effects of these drugs? Where are these drugs used? You must read your pharma notes for this. In this way, you can integrate medicine with pharmacology. Remember, my dear friends, drug-induced cardiomyopathy carries the worst prognosis. So, anticyclines, these are the dangerous drugs, and when they cause cardiomyopathy, they carry the worst prognosis. ABVD regime used for Hodgkin's lymphoma contains anthracycline. CHOP regimen used for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma also contains anthracyclines. So, drug-induced also included drugs are cyclophosphamide. My dear friends, you must know from your pharma knowledge that the most common side effect of cyclophosphamide is hemorrhagic cystitis. It can also cause bladder cancer. And again, you must know that hemorrhagic cystitis can be relieved by giving mesna. Chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine can also cause dilated cardiomyopathy and arrhythmia. Again, my dear friends, hydroxychloroquine is an important question because it has been used for the prophylaxis of the COVID-19. So, hydroxychloroquine cannot be taken on a lighter way. It has a side effect of dilated cardiomyopathy and it has to be used in precaution. Trastuzumab, reversible and dose-dependent damage, it has been used in the treatment of breast cancer. Again, my dear friends, the drugs you read in medicine, the side effects and the mechanism of action should be on your tips. And for this, you have to take your pharma notes and read it. In this way, we can be able to integrate the subjects. While reading medicine, you must be able to revise parts of patho, parts of pharma, parts of micro, and parts of biochemistry as well. So in this way, by the time you complete medicine, you'll have some knowledge of these topics, and when you read your pharma notes, it will be easy for you in the future revision. Alcoholic cardiomyopathy. This was a previous exam question, my dear friend. It is reversible cause. It is reversible after cessation of alcohol, and the most common cause of dilated cardiomyopathy is alcohol, and alcohol more commonly causes dilated cardiomyopathy. It is the most common cardiomyopathy overall. And my dear friends, remember it is reversible. Many of us think that it is irreversible. No, it is reversible after the cessation of alcohol. And again, it can be a potential question. The toxin involved is acetaldehyde, and it is a risk factor. Dilated cardiomyopathy and alcoholic cardiomyopathy is a risk factor for atrial fibrillation. Mind you, my dear friends, you should not be confused with holiday heart syndrome, which is after acute alcohol intoxication. Holiday heart syndrome is atrial fibrillation developing after acute alcohol intoxication, whereas alcoholic cardiomyopathy is after taking alcohol over many years. 60 to 20 grams over 10 to 20 years leads to alcoholic cardiomyopathy. So, both are different things. Holiday heart syndrome develops after acute alcohol intoxication. We already saw a brief history about peripartum cardiomyopathy. It carries a good prognosis, my dear friends, but there are high chances of recurrence, seen in the third trimester or the first 6 months after pregnancy. We saw in our clinical scenario a pregnant and a lactating female came with the chief complaint of fatigue and dyspnea. Pathological factors. This can be an important patho question, can be including anti-VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, and prolactin fragments. This is an important question. Lactating female develops this peripartum cardiomyopathy because prolactin fragments are implicated in the cause of this cardiomyopathy. The risk factors include, as we already saw, preeclampsia, hypertension in pregnancy, use of tocolytics is a risk factor for peripartum cardiomyopathy. Multiple pregnancies, multipara, age more than 30 years. As we already saw in the clinical scenario, a 30-year-old female, so more than or equal to 30 years, late pregnancy is also a risk factor for peripartum cardiomyopathy. Treatment. As my dear friends, you must be able to guess the treatment based on the pathophysiological factor, that is prolactin. So prolactin analogs bromocriptine has been used for the treatment of peripartum cardiomyopathy, and supportive management like IV fluids, inotropes can be given. Remember friends, peripartum cardiomyopathy carries a good prognosis, but there are high chances of recurrence in the next pregnancy. Again, whenever you hear the word bromocriptine, it is a prolactin inhibiting factor. So you must be able to know the indications, recall the indications of bromocriptine from your pharma knowledge. That is hyperprolactinemia. The first indication, drug of choice for hyperprolactinemia is cabergoline, more commonly than bromocriptine. Bromocriptine is used for hyperprolactinemia in pregnancy or when pregnancy is anticipated. But remember, the drug of choice for hyperprolactinemia is cabergoline. which is also a prolactin inhibiting factor. For Parkinsonism, it is used, bromocriptine is used because in Parkinsonism, there is loss of cholinergic neurons in substantia nigra. So you need a dopamine antagonist to raise the dopamine levels, to decrease the dopamine levels. Acromegaly. The drug of choice for acromegaly is a recombinant growth factor inhibitor that is pegvisomant. But cabergoline and bromocriptine can be used for acromegaly and cabergoline is preferred over bromocriptine. Again, my dear friends, this is an important physiology image where you see from the hypothalamus to the pituitary there are stimulatory factors and inhibitory factors. Dopamine inhibits the secretion of prolactin from the pituitary. In fact, the pituitary dopamine prolactin inhibiting factor is nothing but dopamine, and estrogen stimulates the production of prolactin. So the more dopamine you give, the less the prolactin, and so the drug of choice for hyperprolactinemia is bromocriptine or cabergoline. Again, this is a very important update, my dear friends. Bromocriptine can be used for the treatment of type 2 diabetes mellitus. Yes, not only metformin, bromocriptine can also be used for diabetes mellitus, but the dose is not same which is used for hyperprolactinemia. And hyperprolactinemia, the dose of bromocriptine is high, whereas for the treatment of type 2 diabetes mellitus, bromocriptine is given in small doses, taken early in the morning, increases early morning dopaminergic activity and reduces the sympathetic activity. This restores the insulin sensitivity. So, bromocriptine is a new drug which has been approved for the treatment of type 2 diabetes mellitus. So, it is newly approved. It's not a new drug. It has been newly approved for the treatment of type 2 diabetes mellitus. So, it is a potential MCQ. So, let's see another clinical scenario, my dear friends. A 20-year-old male patient from Brazil was admitted in view of fever, malaise, and generalized edema. He also developed a painless erythematous swelling of the right upper lid with ipsilateral lymphadenopathy. On blood examination, circulating trypomastigotes were demonstrated. The patient was given IV benznidazole and was recovering significantly. After the fifth day of admission, the patient started developing fatigue and dyspnea. The dyspnea progressed gradually from grade 1 to grade 4. The patient was hypotensive and his pulse was feeble, alternating with high and low amplitude. What is the likely diagnosis? Again, friends, by this you must know that the pulse is alternating high and low amplitude. You must know that it is pulsus alternans. Dyspnea progressing from grade 1 to grade 4, fatigue and dyspnea. So there are signs of left heart failure. The patient was given IV benznidazole. Again, my dear friends, this is an integration of pharma and microbiology with medicine. What is the drug of choice? Benznidazole is the drug of choice for which condition? See, he came with the swelling, with the eyelid swelling and ipsilateral lymphadenopathy. What is this sign called? Circulating trypomastogotes were also demonstrated in his blood. So, painless erythematous swelling of the right upper eyelid with ipsilateral lymphadenopathy, circulating trypomastogotes were demonstrated. IV benznidazole was given. Benznidazole is the drug of choice for which condition? After the fifth day of admission, that is, after during the recovery phase of his illness, he developed fatigue and dyspnea, and his pulse was feeble with alternating high and low amplitude, that is, pulses alternance. So it is a cardiomyopathy or a myocarditis developing after viral illness. Classical history and classically it is due to Chagas disease. So what is the sign known as? Ipsilateral eyelid swelling with subcutaneous swelling of the near the eye with ipsilateral lymphadenopathy. It is known as Romanas sign. So you must be able to integrate your micro knowledge in medicine, my dear friend. And the drug of choice for Chagas disease is IV benznidazole or nifurtimox. So these are all potential MCQs in your microbiology, which you are revising in medicine. This is a trypomastogote. It is a diagnostic form for the diagnosis of Chagas disease. And again, as I said, there is lymphadenopathy. And in lymph nodes, you will be able to memorize from your microbiology that amastogotes can be demonstrated in the lymph nodes. Circulating trypomastogotes with amastogotes in the lymph nodes, classical picture of Chagas disease. So classically, we see it is a case of myocarditis developing in the recovery phase of viral illness. So the criteria for diagnosing myocarditis, you just need to remember the name, my dear friends. It is known as Dallas criteria. There is global hypokinesia without regional variation. And myocarditis can widely present in two clinical ways. The first way is acute coronary syndrome like illness, that is, chest pain, fatigue, and sweating with global left ventricular dysfunction, with troponin I elevation and ECG showing HT and T changes. And the patient may also develop a new onset heart failure. This is also an important presentation of myocarditis. So, acute coronary syndrome like illness or patients developing a new onset heart failure, there can be two ways in which myocarditis can present. So, dilated cardiomyopathy can develop following myocarditis. Again, my dear friends, you must be able to, from your micro knowledge, you must be able to differentiate between sleeping sickness and Chagas disease. Sleeping sickness, the etiological agent is Trypanosoma brucei. Chagas disease, Trypanosoma cruzi. Again, C for C. The vector causing sleeping sickness is CCA fly. It is caused by the bite of CCA fly. And the vector transmitting Chagas disease is Reduid bug. And again, from your micro, read your micro notes. It is due to the feces contaminated by the Reduid bug. It is not by the bite actually. The amplifying host for sleeping sickness is armadillos, with the amplifying host for Chagas disease is livestock. And again, the clinical sign in sleeping sickness is Winterbottom sign. The clinical sign in Chagas disease is Romanas sign, ipsilateral eyelid swelling with regional lymphadenopathy. And again, circulating trypomastogotes have been demonstrated in the blood smear or Buffy-coat examination of sleeping sickness, whereas trypomastogotes in the peripheral smear and amastogotes in the lymph node make a way for the diagnosis of Chagas disease. So, you must be able to read the images of this Winterbottom sign and Romanas sign. Again, my dear friends, it is the way you will Google out these images and see them. It is the way you can answer the image-based questions. So this is a Winterbottom sign in Chagas in sleeping sickness, and in Chagas disease you classically see the Romana sign. So, my dear friend, you must be able to clinically orient. This is a Winterbottom sign seen in Trypanosoma brucei, that is sleeping sickness. This is a Romana sign seen in Chagas disease. You must be able to identify these images at a go. So again, at the end of the day, whenever you're discussing about dilated cardiomyopathy, you must be able to identify the reversible and irreversible causes. And the reason is obvious. In the reversible causes, you can take out the toxin or you can take out the causative agent and the cardiomyopathy reverses. So clinically, you need not know all this. You must grossly able to identify the reversible causes and the irreversible causes. The reversible causes are very, very important. These are the toxins like alcohol. Again, my dear friends, alcohol is the most common cause of dilated cardiomyopathy and it is reversible after the cessation of alcohol. Drugs like hydroxychloroquine, heavy metals like lead and mercury. So you may get a case of forensic medicine like lead poisoning case, measles may be given and the diagnosis of dilated cardiomyopathy is expected as the answer. Again, metabolic causes of dilated cardiomyopathy, nutritional deficiencies, thiamine, selenium, and carnitine deficiency. Again, my dear friends, it is not the nutrition excess, it is the deficiency which causes dilated cardiomyopathy. And selenium deficiency causing dilated cardiomyopathy is a very, very important question, and it is nothing but Keshan's disease. Electrolyte deficiencies like hypocalcemia, hypophosphatemia, hypomagnesemia. So, dilated cardiomyopathy is seen. Connective tissue disorders. Sarcoidosis is the most important non-infective cause of dilated cardiomyopathy. In this slide, the important thing is selenium deficiency causing dilated cardiomyopathy is Keshan's disease. And again, it was a previous AIMS question. Selenium excess causing dilated cardiomyopathy was given, which is a false statement. So, as we saw, myocarditis is an important cause of dilated cardiomyopathy. Myocarditis in the infective setting, Chagas disease being the most common cause, and we saw the differences between Chagas disease and sleeping sickness, and Lyme's disease causing Borrelia burgdorferi. There are three phases of Lyme's disease. The causative agent is Borrelia burgdorferi, and the vector for transmission is heart tick. Again, my dear friends, these are the topics which must be at your fingertips. In India, Chagas disease is not so common, my dear friends. We saw the history of the Brazilian boy coming with Romana sign. So in India, the causes of myocarditis include the Coxsackie infection, or adenovirus infection, the HIV, and hepatitis C. All these can lead to myocarditis, again leading to dilated cardiomyopathy. On examination, the features of dilated cardiomyopathy include a biventricular dilatation. Again, my dear friends, in restrictive cardiomyopathy, the right ventricle was more commonly involved than the left ventricle. But in dilated cardiomyopathy, both the ventricles are involved in the same way. The features of left heart failure, like hypotension, cold clammy extremities, renal hypoperfusion, these are due to decreased cardiac output to the peripheral tissues. The features of right heart failure, that is rise JVP, pedal edema, and hepatic congestion. All these are features of right heart failure. So features of both right and left heart failure are seen in dilated cardiomyopathy, whereas in restrictive cardiomyopathy, we saw that the right heart was more involved than the left heart. Pulsus alternans and S3. S3 is due to increased blood flow in the early diastolic phase of the ventricular filling. All these are pathognomic of dilated cardiomyopathy. We saw that S4 was pathognomic of restrictive cardiomyopathy. So pulsus alternans, pulse alternating between high amplitude and low amplitude, is the pathognomic feature of dilated cardiomyopathy. Complications of dilated cardiomyopathy include arrhythmias, thromboembolism disorders, and acute decompensated heart failure. Again, my dear friends, whenever you suspect thromboembolism, you put up the patient on anticoagulation. The treatment include digoxin, diuretics with caution. My dear friends, diuretics are used in the treatment of both restrictive and dilated cardiomyopathy. And as we saw in the question, the patient is usually hypotensive. So you must use the diuretic in with caution because you may land up the patient in severe hypotension. So you're actually harming the patient if you use higher dose of diuretic, ACE inhibitors, and statins. Treatment of choice for both dilated and restrictive cardiomyopathy is cardiac transplantation. My dear friends, all these are symptomatic managements, only work for a limited period of time. Digoxin, diuretic, ACE inhibitors, statins, all these IV fluids, all these work only in the limited condition. The treatment of choice is cardiac transplantation. Again, my dear friend, there are reversible causes of dilated cardiomyopathy that is due to nutritional deficiencies or toxins where the implicating agent can be removed and it can lead to the reversal of the condition where alcoholic cessation can reverse alcoholic dilated cardiomyopathy. So only in irreversible causes cardiac transplantation is the treatment of choice. Again, in forensic question, for cardiac transplantation you need to have beating donors and beating donors are very less in our country. So it again becomes a big challenge for cardiac transplantation. Again, clinical scenario number 5. A 20-year-old male patient was brought to the casualty unconscious from the football ground with cold clammy extremities. So, male patient casualty unconscious from football ground with cold clammy extremities. His BP and pulse were not recordable. He was immediately started on dopamine trip. The boy was usually dull and inactive in sports and other outdoor activities. He was chosen as a substitute player for today's football match and got a chance to play today. He was very excited to play his very first football match and started running swiftly right from the word go. After 10 minutes of play, he suddenly fell on the ground and started sweating profusely. Gradually, he lost consciousness and hands became cold and clammy. What is the most likely gene implicated in the condition? Again, my dear friends, in this type of questions, in a clinical scenario, you need to get the keywords right and not only the diagnosis, you need to get the gene which is implicated in this condition. So the key words is unconscious from the football ground. So when he was trying to run, he fell unconscious and his BP and pulse were not recordable. The boy was usually dull and active in the sports, so it was the very first time he may be involved in a vigorous physical activity. Suddenly fell on the ground and there is no precipitating event, started sweating profusely. So there is sympathetic overactivity in case of heart failure, so sweating profusely and palpitations are quite common. What is the most likely gene mutated in this condition? My dear friends, this is a classical description of HOCM, hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, and the classical features of which cause sudden cardiac death in young athletes. So the most common gene implicated in hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy is beta-myosin gene, and HOCM is the most common cause of sudden cardiac death in young athletes. And again, we should know the other causes of sudden cardiac death in young athletes. It is Brugada syndrome. So recently, it has been implicated that beta-myosin gene is a must in those who are training for young athletes and in the young football players. You can watch numerous videos in the internet on the sudden cardiac death of young football players. So, what is the pathophysiology of this disease, hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy? This is the only type of cardiomyopathy in which the pathophysiology is more interesting and more important than the clinical features of the disease. There is severe left ventricular hypertrophy without dilatation. Friends, what is this hypertrophy known as? It is concentric left ventricular hypertrophy. There is left ventricular outflow tract obstruction due to SAM. What is SAM? Systolic anterior movement of the mitral valve leaflet. So there is left ventricular hypertrophy, which is occluding its own lumen, and there is left ventricular outflow tract obstruction due to SAM, that is systolic anterior movement of the mitral valve. The coronary vessels are stiff and show intramural occlusion in these conditions. So stiff coronary vessels plus left ventricular hypertrophy demanding increased oxygen supply may lead to sudden cardiac death. So this is a case of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, my dear friends. In this, there is asymmetric septal hypertrophy with left ventricular wall hypertrophy leading to the cavity, which is described as a banana-shaped cavity in your pathology. So, banana-shaped cavity, eccentric left ventricular hypertrophy, and septal hypertrophy leading to occlusion of the lumen and causing diastolic failure of the heart. Pathological finding in hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy is myofiber disarray. Again, my dear friends, this is a very important pathology question. Myofiber disarray is seen in pathological in hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. What is the sign which is seen in myocardial infarction? Pathological sign. It is loss of the linearity of the myofibrils. Don't get confused between MI and HOCM. HOCM, there is myofiber disarray. In MI, there is loss of linearity of the myofibrils. 98 to 99% of them show stable course. I mean, usually HOCM is a post-mortem diagnosis. But again, it can lead to sudden cardiac death in young adults. So it is very important to rule out beta-myosin gene mutation in a young athlete or a young football player. Due to hypertrophy, the patients are prone to develop arrhythmias. Females and males are usually affected in a similar way. But again, this is an important question. Females show more progressive course, my dear friends. So, sudden cardiac death is more common in males, but more progressive HOCM is seen in females. It's an autosomal dominant condition, so the most common gene mutated is beta-myosin gene mutation. So you must ask for the history of similar sudden cardiac death in the relatives. The titin was the gene most commonly mutated in dilated cardiomyopathy. Beta-myosin was the gene mutated in HOCM. So don't get confused between titin, which is mutated in dilated cardiomyopathy, beta-myosin, which is mutated in HOCM. Again, my dear friends, my question is, what is the gene mutated in left ventricular non-compaction? I said it half an hour ago, which is tephazin gene mutation. So in this way, you should be able to revise the topics you read 1 hour ago, 1 day ago, 1 week ago. In this way, you must revise at the time of studying, so that at the end of the completing your syllabus, 2 to 3 revisions are already over. Again, in HOCM, it is the diastolic dysfunction of the heart which is more common than the systolic dysfunction, same as restrictive cardiomyopathy. Earliest symptom is subtle exercise intolerance. Again, this is a very interesting phenomenon, my dear friends. There is dynamic left ventricular outflow tract obstruction due to systolic anterior movement of the mitral valve leaflet and asymmetric septal hypertrophy. And HOCM can also lead to functional MR, that is mitral regurgitation. Again, my dear friends, in HOCM, there is only mild to moderate mitral regurgitation. If there is severe mitral regurgitation, you must rule out dilated cardiomyopathy or other intrinsic abnormality of the mitral valve, such as mitral valve prolapse. So, this is the condition, my dear friends. There is asymmetric septal hypertrophy, there is left ventricular wall hypertrophy leading to systolic anterior movement, SAM, systolic anterior movement of the mitral valve leaflet during the ejection phase, during the rapid ejection phase, leading to mitral regurgitation. Which leaflet gets displaced? It is the posterior leaflet. It is evident from this diagram. Left ventricular outflow tract obstruction can be caused due to the LV cavity size is less and the degree of obstruction of the left ventricle is determined by these three factors. It is left ventricular cavity size and preload, the force of contraction, and the afterload. Again, my dear friends, it is the preload which is more important, which determines the degree of left ventricular outflow tract obstruction. Again, it is purely a diastolic condition of the dysfunction of the heart, and the systolic dysfunction depends on three factors. The first one is preload, that is the amount of blood which is received by the left ventricle at the end of diastole. So whenever there is decrease in preload, the left ventricular cavity reduces and there is increase in the intensity of murmur. So less blood producing louder murmur. This is a very important exception, my dear friends. So decrease in preload cause increase in the intensity of the murmur. Dehydration, diuretics, and nitrates are contraindicated in HOCM patients because they decrease the preload. Dehydration, loss of body fluid. Diuretics, loss of body water in the form of urine. Nitrates cause vasodilation and decrease the preload. All these decrease the preload and increase the level of left ventricular outflow tract obstruction, and it can lead to increase in the intensity of the murmur. Force of contraction. Second point determining the left ventricular outflow tract obstruction is the force of contraction. Increased force of contraction will worsen the obstruction and the intensity of the murmur increases. So, increase in the force of contraction. Any condition which increases the force of contraction, like digoxin or exercise or tachycardia, will increase the force of contraction and will worsen the condition. So, digoxin is contraindicated in HOCM. Exercise and tachycardia can worsen HOCM. So, exercise and tachycardia. We saw that young athletes can, on their first exercise, can develop tachycardia quite easily and it can result in HOCM and fatal sudden cardiac death. Afterload. Decrease in the afterload will increase the level of obstruction. It will increase the left ventricular outflow tract obstruction. So, how can you decrease the afterload? That is by Valsalva or by standing position. Remember, my dear friends, every murmur in cardiology, whether it is mitral stenosis, mitral regurgitation, aortic stenosis, aortic regurgitation, they decrease with Valsalva and standing position, whereas HOCM murmur increases in intensity in Valsalva and standing, and mitral valve prolapse (MVP) murmur increases in duration. So, this is a very important question, my dear. HOCM murmur increases in intensity with Valsalva and standing. MVP murmur increases in duration. Duration of the murmur increases in Valsalva and standing. So this is a very important question and has been asked many times. Functional mitral regurgitation. Mitral regurgitation develops as a consequence of systolic anterior movement of the mitral valve leaflet and is directed posteriorly and is usually mild to moderate in degree. Severe mitral regurgitation in HOCM patients raises the probability of myxomatous degeneration of the mitral valve. So you must rule out mitral valve prolapse, coexisting mitral valve prolapse in HOCM patients if you see there is severe mitral regurgitation. So here is an echocardiogram. Again, my dear friends, echo is the investigation of choice to diagnose HOCM patients, where you see asymmetric septal hypertrophy and a banana-shaped ventricular cavity occluding the ventricular cavity, and there is left ventricular outflow tract obstruction. And again, this can be a potential question, my dear friends. The Doppler findings in HOCM patients. There is dagger-shaped signal on Doppler with a banana-shaped cavity on echocardiography. So this can be an important image-based question. So in this way, you should be able to study the images in conjunction with your medicine knowledge so that images are not left aside as a separate entity. So this is a dagger-shaped signal on continuous wave Doppler sonogram of left ventricle in HOCM patients. So let's quickly see. So the pathophysiology of HOCM included major diastolic dysfunction of the heart, just as restrictive cardiomyopathy. But there is also systolic dysfunction due to left ventricular outflow tract obstruction. And the left ventricular outflow tract obstruction depended on three conditions. The first one was preload, the second one was afterload, the third one was force of contraction. So the only murmur which increases in intensity on standing on Valsalva is HOCM. Double or triple apex is seen on palpation of the apex, and there is hyperdynamic apex in HOCM patients. And there is classically pulsus bisferiens. Again, my dear friends, you should be strong in your clinics. Pulsus bisferiens is a type of pulse where there are two peaks simultaneously in the systole. That is characteristic pulse of severe aortic regurgitation, severe AR plus AS, or severe AR. Pulsus bisferiens is seen, but theoretically, pulsus bisferiens is also seen in HOCM. There can be potential image-based question where pulses experience is shown and the cause has to be identified. It is none other than HOCM. And this is the murmur of HOCM, my dear friends. In HOCM, there is an ejection systolic murmur. Ejection systolic murmur is a crescendo decrescendo murmur which peaks in the mid systole and is present throughout systole and weakens by the end of systole. So the heart event between S1 and S2 is systole and the murmur of HOCM is ejection systolic murmur. Again, my dear friends, the S1 is normal in HOCM, but in the S2, there is single S2 or paradoxical split of S2. So, because A2 comes earlier than P2, but in HOCM, there is dynamic obstruction of the left ventricle. So, A2 aortic valve closes a little later. So, there can be no split or paradoxical liver split regarding the degree of obstruction of the left ventricle. So, clinically, you can say if there is reverse split, the degree of obstruction is more and it carries a poorer prognosis. S3 and S4 both may be present. Again, my dear friends, you must remember that S4 is the pathognomic of restrictive cardiomyopathy and S3 is pathognomic of dilated cardiomyopathy. Ejection systolic murmur is seen in HOCM, but it is the characteristic murmur of aortic stenosis and pulmonary stenosis. Again, my dear friend, in aortic stenosis, you should be able to differentiate between the two because in the HOCM, the murmur does not radiate into carotids, but in aortic stenosis, the ejection systolic murmur radiates to the carotids. No radiation to carotids plus dynamic auscultation. Dynamic auscultation is by standing or valsalva. All the murmurs decrease in intensity while standing or valsalva except HOCM murmur where the intensity increases and mitral valve prolapse murmur MVP murmur where the duration increases. So by dynamic auscultation and by radiation you can differentiate the ejection systolic murmur of HOCM and aortic stenosis. Again, let us come to the variants of the cardiomyopathies. A 20-year-old male patient from Japan presented to the OPD with subtle exercise intolerance and fatigue. On examination, his pulse was hyperkinetic, high volume pulse. BP was 140 by 90 and FX was hyperdynamic. The ECG was taken, which showed the below findings. Again, my dear friends, you see it is a young male patient from Japan presenting with exercise intolerance and fatigue. On examination, his pulse was hyperkinetic and BP was 140 by 90 mm of mercury and Apex was hyperdynamic. The ECG was taken where it showed. See, my dear friends, you must be able to interpret the ECG. The striking finding in the ECG is itself enough. In this ECG, the striking finding is giant T wave inversions. These are the giant T wave inversions. Giant T wave inversions. Giant T wave inversions in lead V2 to V6. So the diagnosis is Yamaguchi disease, a variant of HOCM in Japanese patients where the progression of the disease is usually very fast and there are giant T wave inversions in ECG. This is a very specific finding, my dear friend. So you must be able to memorize this. So I created a clinical scenario so that you can able to memorize this better and you can able to recollect this better. Again, my dear friends, a 20-year-old male patient from Japan came to your OPD. 20-year-old male patient from Japan came to your OPD with the chief complaint of chest pain and sweating. And the chest pain and sweating were developed just after the death of. So, a 20-year-old female patient from Japan came to the emergency with chest pain and profuse sweating. She was dyspneic and tachypneic. Her pulse rate was 150 per minute and was feeble. She developed symptoms immediately after hearing the news of the death of her most beloved pet dog Dolly. She was shattered on hearing the news and immediately showed these symptoms. She was in a confused and a delirious state. An ECG was taken and it showed the following findings. So, my dear friends, a 20-year-old female patient from Japan came to the emergency with chest pain and profuse sweating. So, chest pain and profuse sweating, they suggest features of MI. She was dyspneic and tachypneic, dyspnea and tachypnea. Pulse rate was very high, pulse was very feeble. She developed symptoms immediately after hearing the news of the death of her most beloved pet dog Dolly. She was shattered on hearing the news and immediately showed these symptoms. So let us see what is the ECG show. So my dear friends, this is characteristic ST elevation in leads V2 to V6. So ST elevation V2, V3, V4, V5, V6 and leads 2, 3 and AVF. So there is ST elevation in lead 2, 3 and there is ST elevation from leads V2 to V6. This is a classical case of MI. So angiogram is a must to rule out MI. Angiogram showed normal blood supply to the left ventricle. Echo was done, which showed apical ballooning of the left ventricle. So, angiogram showing normal blood supply. So, rule out MI. Echo showing apical ballooning of the left ventricle. So, it is a rare case, my dear friends. Female patient from Japan with an emotional trigger developing MI-like symptoms. It is nothing none other than a Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. This is a very, very important and very crucial question, my dear friends. It is young females after emotional trigger due to stress-induced cardiomyopathy, which characteristically shows the apical ballooning on the echocardiogram. This is the apical ballooning where the apex of the left ventricle is ballooned out and they show the symptoms of left ventricular failure or myocardial infarction. The ECG itself shows non-specific ST and T wave elevations, ST elevation with T wave inversions, but angiogram is must and it will diagnose Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. No, no. Echocardiogram will diagnose echocardiomyopathy. Angiogram will rule out MI, thereby helping us giving the idea of Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. So what is it? It is also known as apical ballooning syndrome or the broken heart syndrome. This is the normal heart of the left ventricle, my dear friend, whereas in Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, the shape of the left ventricle becomes similar to that of an octopus trap. This is the Japanese octopus trap, which is known as Takotsubo, which is having a narrow neck and a broad base. So this is known as Takotsubo cardiomyopathy because the apex of the left ventricle balloons and it resembles the Takotsubo. Pathophysiology involved, it is due to catecholamine toxicity. I already said it is due to the death of following the death of a loved one. So there is catecholamine toxicity and there is ballooning of the left ventricle. And as we know, my dear friends, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine, these are the catecholamines. They are very useful for each and everything in our life. But excess of anything is harmful. So stress-induced cardiomyopathy is Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. It is an acute onset cardiomyopathy. Remember, my friends, this is very, very important because all the cardiomyopathies we saw were chronic, that is, dilated and restrictive cardiomyopathies were chronic, whereas HOCM was also a chronic cardiomyopathy, but it can present acutely with sudden cardiac death. So, acute onset cardiomyopathy after emotional onset or emotional trauma, especially in Japanese patients, you have to rule out Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. Clinical findings: It is classically seen in postmenopausal females above 60 years of age. We already saw postmenopausal females above 60 years of age which complains of chest pain and excessive sweating, and most commonly after emotional trauma or mostly after the death of the loved one. So it is also called broken heart syndrome. So MI following death of loved one, you have to rule out Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. ECG shows ST elevation in the anterior leads. Again, my dear friends, ST elevation in the anterior leads. You must know what are the anterior leads. Those are leads V1 to V6 and lead 1 and AVL. Troponin I and troponin T may be elevated and they may be non-specific in diagnosing a case of MI. They're only prognostic indicators. You cannot diagnose a case of MI based on the levels of troponin I and troponin T. So this is the ECG, my dear friend. Like already said, anterior leads V1 to V5 are anterior leads which show elevation, and lead 1 and AVL are also showing elevation, ST elevation. So mimics MI, but never conclude this without doing angiography. So without doing angiography, just by ECG, if you give thrombolysis, you may land up the patient in trouble, and the most potential complication of thrombolysis is intracranial bleed. Angiography is perfectly normal in a case of Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, and the diagnosis can be confirmed only after performing an echocardiography, where apical ballooning is seen. So diagnosis can be confirmed only after doing echocardiography, and MI can be ruled out only after doing angiography. Treatment: Intra-aortic balloon pump and supportive therapy like IV fluids are to be given. Again, my dear friends, you should not give norepinephrine, epinephrine, or dopamine as it is already stress-induced cardiomyopathy. It is acute onset cardiomyopathy presenting as cardiogenic shock. So the first thing that strikes your mind is dopamine or noradrenaline drip. But again, it's a big no in this condition, as already it is stress-induced and you cannot give them without confirming that it is Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. So history is very important in medicine, my dear friend. So emotional trauma and history, stress-induced cardiomyopathy, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine are a big contraindication. Intra-aortic balloon pump and supportive management are only done. And Takotsubo cardiomyopathy carries good prognosis. Percutaneous coronary intervention (PCI), which is done for MI patients, is also contraindicated. As we already know, the blood supply to myocardium is absolutely normal. So angiography is a must to rule out MI in a case of Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. So, in brief, why to study Takotsubo cardiomyopathy? Because it is an acute onset cardiomyopathy, whereas restrictive and dilated cardiomyopathies were chronic. It is reversible and the prognosis is good. We saw that for dilated and restrictive cardiomyopathy are largely irreversible and the prognosis is poor. It mimics ST elevation MI, STEMI, but percutaneous coronary intervention PCI is contraindicated because angiography is normal and you cannot do PCI when the angiography is normal. Causes of sudden cardiac death. Sudden cardiac death is sudden unexpected death caused by the loss of cardiac function within 1 hour of being seen or heard normal. This can be a potential MCQ, my dear friends. Within 1 hour of the precipitating events, there is sudden cardiac death. We already saw one cause of sudden cardiac death. What is it? HOCM. What is the second cause we saw? It is Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. And again, I already said HOCM is the most common cause of sudden cardiac death in young adults. What is the most common cause, second most common cause of sudden cardiac death in young adults? It is Brugada syndrome. We will discuss about it in the next videos to come. So, without known pre-existing heart disease, I already said cardiomyopathy, you must rule out valvular heart disease, congenital heart disease, or hypertension without putting a diagnosis of cardiomyopathy. Again, let us revise or review what here we have read in this hour-long discussion. That is dilated cardiomyopathy. Dilated cardiomyopathy, it is chiefly a systolic failure of the heart. The right and left ventricle are affected simultaneously and most commonly myocarditis following viral illness. Chagas disease is the most common cause of dilated cardiomyopathy. Alcohol was a reversible cause of dilated cardiomyopathy. And we saw the right and left ventricles were affected in the same way, with the left ventricle involved more commonly than the right ventricle. Dilated cardiomyopathy and ischemic cardiomyopathy are both not the same because ischemic cardiomyopathy is a separate entity, whereas there is pre-existing coronary artery disease, and you cannot put a diagnosis of cardiomyopathy in a pre-existing coronary artery disease. And the sound which is characteristic of dilated cardiomyopathy is S3, and the pulses alternance is characteristic of dilated cardiomyopathy. In restrictive cardiomyopathy, we saw that S4 is the characteristic of restrictive cardiomyopathy, and it is a form of cardiomyopathy where the right side is involved more common than the left side, and it is a diastolic failure of the heart, whereas dilated was a systolic failure of the heart. And amyloidosis is the most common cause of restrictive cardiomyopathy. Hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy is chiefly a diastolic failure of the heart with left ventricular outflow tract obstruction depending upon three factors. And the most important is the murmur which increases in intensity on standing on Valsalva is HOCM murmur. And we saw in detail what is Yamaguchi syndrome, where there is chain T wave inversion, and what is Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, acute onset cardiomyopathy, in elderly females following death of loved one, and intra-aortic balloon pump is the treatment of choice with a big no for norepinephrine, epinephrine, or dopamine, as it is already stress induced and they can only aggravate the condition. So, in this way, my dear friends, you need to be able to integrate the things that we read in medicine with pharmacology, in medicine with pathology and microbiology. We also read about Fabry disease, that is in biochemistry. It's a cause of restrictive cardiomyopathy. So, in this way, you must be able to integrate different subjects so that by reading all the 19 subjects, you will be already revising the known subjects to you. You will be already revising the known topics to you. So, integration is the key, whatever may be the exam. And my dear friends, never let the pattern of the exam disappoint you. Never let the pattern of the exam change your seat of choice. So, read in an integrated manner and revise regularly by the end of the topic. So, stay tuned for further updates. I'll come up with more videos in medicine. Thank you.